this part of Idaho, you do see so many more of those small family farms that aren't developed and aren't subdivisions, and that is so rare. So my grandpa, he immigrated over from Denmark.
Okay.
And when he came here, he had about 150 acres. And so all of this patch of land is about 50 acres. So that was my mom's inheritance when her father passed away.
How did you just come up with this?
With the flower pot, it's a weird structure. You know, it's not normal. This is my childhood home. It's so fun. My parents built it by themselves. I think it took them about 18 years. We had a little trailer that was over here. We lived in the trailer when I was a little kid and then built the house. Yeah, so they did all of the logs, all the, like the coving. Crazy.
18 years.
18 years. They were cash flowing most of it. And so it just, you know, they did the work themselves, plumbing, electric, everything.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. So that's where I grew up. And then my aunt and uncle sold their property, but my mom always held on and just has it farmed out. The crazy thing is, like, this has been in the family for over 65 years.
Yeah.
It's a long time. And it's never been developed except for, you know, them building the house. So when it came time to thinking through like retirement options for my mom, it was, you know, you can sell the property, but it doesn't really do much for like the family legacy. And
I tried to do it in rows, but a lot of it died and I ran out of seeds. So, but it's red and a yellow, and then it's a purple.
so it was always something on the back of her mind of like, what do I want to do? What would be kind of fun longer term?
Looks like they're popping up. I planted those last weekend. So you can see the little seedlings.
So that's where she had the idea for the flower farm. And that was like just a way of kind of honoring her dad, a different type of farming.
So what are you up to today?
Oh, just weeding some of the flowers here. So I've got status growing here. These make great dried flowers. And then here we have some celosia. And then we have cosmos over here. I ended up reseeding this because a lot of it died. But these here are yarrow. And then here, look, we have chamomile.
Could you turn this into tea or no?
Yeah, you can. I've been using everything organic. I haven't put any chemicals or anything. Here you can see they're popping up, all my sunflowers. So this whole row, this 50-foot row is all sunflowers.
So my mom just this year did the little shed. So this was, I think, like a 2-month project. She bought a kit and it took forever.
No.
This is eventually going to be her storefront. And so this is where people would stop by, pick up their vase, and then walk over to the farm, which is all of this area.
Or a giant, beautiful sunflower. You don't need help. I know, I'm gonna help you.
We were coming across this idea of like, okay, how do we complement the flower farm? What type of structure would fit for that?
We still have tons of flowers.
And so we came up with the idea of doing the flower pot to complement the flower farm.
We've got the property marked off. That center stake is about where we're going to start. This is the foundation. So it's this whole section. This is where it will go. Now our back door is about here.
And your mom, was she on board
No,
since
in
the
the beginning she was not. So for her, it took a little bit of convincing.
Here we are on the back of the flower pot house. You can see the rooftop balcony.
So the shape was challenging enough. So the base is 20 feet. The top is about 30 feet wide. So it truly does taper out. And when we were doing the construction and the design, that taper made it really difficult, very complicated, very hard to do. When we first started popping up, so when the framing started to get erected, people were like, what in the heck are they building? We had comments of, it looked like a KFC bucket.
This is all of my work today. Do you see it? Getting those arches in place so that instead of it being square, it's arched. Profound.
We have a lot of people that think it looks like a coffee cup. The most popular online one is the chum bucket. And so, you know, now at first we were like, oh no, that's not what it is. We just kind of laugh about it. We're like, that's our April Fool's plan. Like, we'll be fine.
Wow. I mean, this season, the pot really stands out. That's all you see. I mean, it matches the earth, actually.
It actually does. And part of that was somewhat intentional.
Okay, so we are mixing the pigment in here. And then this, it's kind of crazy, that's all it is. And then it goes up there.
Like when we were choosing the colors, a lot of people expected it to be like super, super green. And we didn't want to detract from the flower farm. So that was very intentional. And then it was also like, how do we keep this low maintenance? How do we make the landscaping so it's not too hard to maintain year round?
So this is what I've got working today. I've got to do all the electrical conduit to the house, which is quite a distance.
And so that's kind of how we came up with how it is, and it doesn't detract from the flower pot at all.
So did you look and see like what color is the earth here?
We were initially thinking, should we do a normal terracotta color? And when we put it up there, it just looked so funky. So we didn't love it.
Oh, really? Because what's a normal stucco terracotta would be redder, right?
A lot more red.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just like, it looked a little out of place when we had it up there.
So what color is this? Do you know?
This one, I forget what exactly it is. I think it's called Totally Tan. Totally tan.
So Idaho earth, or Burley earth is totally tan.
It's totally
That
tan.
I now know is the color.
Isn't that funny?
Oh.
And it's really fun because in the spring, when you get that green color all around, it's beautiful and it just pops even more. And so it is really, it's quite stunning. It really is very pretty.
I mean, I like even how you set this up. Like it's kind of fairy tale-ish. Like you could almost be in Alice in Wonderland because it's like overgrown.
Yeah, that was kind of part of it. Like we wanted people to drive up and feel kind of humor. Like this is so ridiculous. I cannot believe it. Like that was part of the appeal for us. And so it worked out. I mean, we have so many people when we were doing the build that would just pull over and just stop and take pictures. And
So you decided just to do 2 little windows up front. I mean, you could have put more up above or like.
we kind of wanted the feel of actually being in a flower pot when you were seeing it from the first time. So we initially thought about putting some windows there, but we thought it might detract from the structure. And so we chose to do just the 2 in the front, the 2 in the back, and then 1 upstairs for egress. And so when we were doing that, we were like, oh my gosh, is it gonna be too dark inside? Is it not enough windows? But it worked out okay, it really did.
It's great. And even the path is just curved, nothing straight.
And this is so fun too, because we actually did the concrete work ourselves.
Oh, wow.
So my
Okay.
mom and I did this. We went back and forth on styles and designs and all kinds of things. And when we finally did this pathway, it was just so fun because it gave it a little bit more of that whimsical feel. And we learned how to do concrete.
Which is hard, easy?
This sidewalk was great because this was our second concrete project. The first was the back patio, and that was rough. It was a learning curve. When we were initially designing, we wanted to do an earth bag home, but the earth bag, that structure doesn't work so well. Usually it's the opposite direction. And so when we started getting into the weeds on that, it just wasn't the right material for this, which really bummed me out because that would have been cool.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe another one.
It's nice to be inside the pot. It's cold. Oh my gosh,
It
it's
is
cold.
chilly.
That's about freezing. Wow. So it's just feels like being inside a flower pot. I mean, you didn't really take too much away from it. You look straight up and you see like the whole thing is
24 feet tall. And a lot of people, when we first started doing the interior of the flower pot too, they were expecting it to be very bright and colorful and like very whimsical. And we wanted to give you that feel of you're actually in the flower pot. So it's a little moodier, it's a little bit more like soil colored. So it was very intentional. Some people love that, some people hate it.
well, it's like, you know, falling. It's like Mr. McGregor. What is it? Peter Rabbit who falls in the flower pot.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
there's something scary about that too, right?
That's right, exactly. it was really interesting too. Like even when they were doing the drywall, it was a hard project because if it were just a normal cylinder, that's difficult enough. But because it tapers out 10 degrees, if you think of like a piece of paper wrapped around a cup, it doesn't sit flat. It'll have a little bit of that concaved area. And so that's where even like the drywall was just a pain in the butt. There were so many seams. So like even like right here, you can see one little seam. And I have to give these guys props because I don't know how they made it even look that good. They had to do 1/4 inch drywall instead of the normal 1/2 inch. And they had to layer it and stack it up so that you get the right thickness. But it was complex. It was a very, like this drywall job alone took them 2 weeks. And this is something that they could do an entire mansion in 2 weeks. So it was a little bit more complicated.
Took them 2 weeks. That means that they were working different days on different patches and they have to manage color and the texture of the thing they were applying. So
Yep, it was a lot. But it was so important to us. We're like, this is just so fun. You have to have that taper. It's part of the flower pot.
you don't see any single color change in the whole wall, which is how many feet you say? 24 feet. There's not a single line.
It was a big job.
What about the floor? What did you?
Yeah, so the floor is all concrete. It was really an interesting thing because this is also the foundation. So when we were making some design choices, we did this fairly intentionally to save on costs. So it was a very expensive project as a whole because it is so unique. To give you context, it's 430-ish square feet. So it's a very small space, but the concrete floor itself, there's a couple little areas where, you know, you can see a saw hit it. And initially we were like, oh, should we try to cover that? But I kind of like that it tells that story and it gives you that character. And so we decided to kind of keep a lot of the imperfections in to give you that feel of it's organic, it's a living space, and it kind of tells a story.
How did you set up the kitchen?
The kitchen was really a fun project, actually. So my mom and I built all of the cabinetry.
What is that?
This
Is it wood?
It's like pull wrap. So I don't know if you've ever seen this. So typically like basements, they have the columns. You can use this pull wrap. It's a very flexible material and it just kind of wraps around.
Oh.
And so we built all the carcasses of the cabinets in my driveway. Okay, and then that one. And then we just installed all the kitchen stuff and did all the work here.
Wow.
And then did all of the pull wrap on here to save a little bit of money too.
That's really pretty.
Yeah,
And you're
thank
saying
you.
it's affordable, but it's actually really.
Yeah, it was pretty affordable. We were surprised.
I love the details. Look at that with a hanging. You just hung.
You have to.
And a tiny microwave. just
Tiny
for space,
microwave, yep.
right?
And then back here you can see kind of our well pump infrastructure there. And then that's all of the pump control.
Okay.
And so the countertops were really fun too. So this was a find off of Facebook Marketplace and it was almost exactly what I wanted. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. So picked this up for, I think it was $250 or $400. I don't remember which. And it was the exact length that I needed. We were still working on a pretty tight budget.
And then for furniture, you found something like that feels like it curves and fits the wall,
You
right?
can kind of tell, like right here, this is the same cabinetry. So we built the bench, which was a little challenging because it did have to curve. But we also have issues with storage in here. There's not very much space. So in here, we made this kind of hidden so we can store all of our backup supplies and whatnot. And then my mom and I did this little backrest.
That is, wait, it's like Velcro to the wall or something?
It's got like a couple little hooks, like picture hooks, that sticks to the wall.
So you actually built this? I mean,
We did, yeah.
Just grab, like, what kind of wood or just found pieces?
Yeah, just normal, like 3/4 inch plywood. And then of course we had to build, you can kind of tell, very like janky construction.
Inside, you don't care. Nobody's going to see
Nobody's gonna know. That's our little secret.
Just put hinges. Wow.
And then the little cushion just goes right on. But
Super.
yep, and it really wasn't too bad at all. And so that's pretty fun. And then our project this winter is we're going to take this table out and do a round one. But we've collected a lot of the flowers from the farm and pressed them. So it'll be an epoxy table with all the flowers in there too.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, because round is not,
Round is so hard.
Yeah.
It is so difficult.
Yeah.
One of the big ones that we did build that I thought was such a fun project was the light fixture. So the root chandelier. Oh, yeah. There was one on Etsy that I fell in love with, but it was about $4,500. So it was way past my budget. So what we did is we decided to kind of make it our own. So I found a light fixture that had the base.
Yeah.
And then that was maybe $120. And then we found these little root vines and just kind of put it all together, made our own light fixture. And so it's kind of a nod to like the roots coming through the roof of the flower pot. That was a cool project that we weren't sure if it was going to turn out. So when we were working on that, we're like, oh, fingers crossed. Let's hope it works. The bathroom is one of my favorites. Okay.
And the bathroom's actually huge for the space. You took up like what, a quarter of the ground floor for the bathroom?
We did. The vanity we built, the shower we also did. So this material is called tadelakt, and it's a Moroccan plaster that's waterproof. This was a big project. It was bigger than I expected, but it was quite challenging because you have to do everything in layers. And when you do the layers, each of the layers take, a few days, sometimes in between. So the entire process took about a month just to get the shower walls and the tadelakt completed on here. Wow. So it's not like a weekend project. You really do have to just do the different layers and get that plaster right. Wow. It was a big challenge.
So what is the layer? Like, what's the process?
So you start with this layer of kind of a coarse pumice material.
Okay.
And so you do 2 layers of that. And then you have the lime plaster. And you mix your color, your pigment in there. And then you have to smooth it out on here. And so the tricky part is getting the timing right, because you want it to be like kind of dry, but not overly dry. And so you have to really start to learn the different drying periods of like, what does it look like? When is it time to do your next coat? Yeah.
So the whole thing, how much of that is tadelakt?
So all of the vanity is tadelakt and all of the shower interior is tadelakt.
All of it.
All of it, yep.
So you did all, that's a lot.
It was such a big project. I initially thought it would maybe be a weekend or 2. I'm like, it can't be that bad. But you have to slow down. You have to do all the different layers. You have to do everything correctly. You have to make sure it's smooth. It was very challenging, but at the end, it's kind of interesting. When you get done with all of the tadelakt process, you put on a layer of this like olive oil soap, and then you do some beeswax, and that's what seals it. And so it's just, it was a big process, but that's the process, lots of layers. And so we got the kit to do all of this, which we had to do something different because even like normal tile would have been really difficult on these walls. And so that type of material made the most sense for what we were trying to do. We got it. Yeah.
And the shape of it is just so like...
it's pretty crazy.
I mean, it's big.
Yeah, it is massive. And it is fun.
And also, the shower itself is different, right? Like I noticed when I took a shower this morning, it's watering me.
That was, my mom loves that part of it. So she often jokes, she's like, it's like you're a little flower, you're getting rained on. And so that is kind of a fun little nod to being a plant ourselves. And then all of the walls were lime washed. It's technically the same color. You can't really, it doesn't really, I think the lime wash material is slightly different. But yeah, all lime wash walls.
Okay, and that's because, like, wait, the whole building or just the bathroom?
Just the bathroom.
Just because of the humidity?
Yep.
Right, okay.
Yep. We did have to seal it pretty good with like a lime wash sealer, because typically it's not very durable for washing. But once you get it all sealed, it kind of gives you that like just peaceful, calm environment. This was a really fun find too. So this Dutch door is my absolute favorite. We found it at Habitat for Humanity. So it was bright blue and it's 8 feet tall. So it's a huge door, very oversized.
Yeah, you can open it now.
But man, in the summer, oh, it's my favorite thing ever.
Why a Dutch door?
I really like that farm feel, you know, so kind of keen into the environment.
Wait, what is the history?
Actually, yes, I do know this.
Okay.
Okay, so what it was is in a lot of the farming towns and farming homes, they would have this so that way the animals wouldn't get in, but you could still get the fresh air. And so it's kind of that nod to the farm aesthetic and the farm architecture. But yeah, it's one of my favorite features.
So the idea is that you're sort of situated in the land. So the flower pot's just a sort of prop to kind of...
That is exactly the case. We wanted it to feel like you're still part of that like farming community, that farming environment. And it is so much more of a slower pace of life in these small towns that you just miss. You know, not as busy, not as much traffic, just kind of quiet. And so it's just that environment that so many people don't have that chance to just slow down and just be able to be one with the farming communities. So that was kind of important for us to feel like you were part of the environment. And it's just kind of fun. Like you'll be sitting in here drinking your coffee in the morning and in the right season, you'll see the tractors drive by and start, you know, plowing crops or harvesting. And so it is just kind of like a fun environment.
Yeah, and you're in touch with the seasons. Like right now, it feels so fall and warm colors and, you know, and the land is that brown and everything's that sort of, and it has its own beauty, right?
It does have its own beauty. You kind of get in tune with the seasons. You start to see, you know, ebbs and flows, and it kind of shows you, you know, everything kind of eventually dies off and we have to calm down in the winter. And so I really do like it. So whenever I visit, I'm reminded of like those different seasons and to just be present with each of the seasons. I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like you calm down in the winter. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, and you have to, even like with the flower farm, it becomes so peaceful and everything dies down and it's such a bummer because you have all the beautiful colors and then one frost and it just wipes it all out. But that's kind of part of the process, you know? So it teaches you to just embrace it instead of trying to fight it or control it. Okay. Yeah, this is fun. I've got a few fun areas out here too. So there's a couple little steps here, and these are kind of fun. My mom did this really cool pattern on the concrete. It's very subtle. So when we were doing the concrete, it was a really challenging space as is for us to just learn on. And so as we were going through the process, we finally got it done. We had it all smoothed out, and the forecast for the weather was supposed to be great. It came down and poured rain all over. And so it ruined all of our concrete. So we had to actually like tarp it and then try to smooth it. So what happens is it'll pull up some of the aggregate.
Okay.
So you can tell like right here, some of that rockiness is coming up. It also discolored it. So my mom found this little hack that was so cool. There's a tool that it looks like a pumice stone on a handle.
Yeah.
And if you just scrape it, it will actually like smooth out the color. And so instead of having to like dig it all up and redo it, we just had to scrape it with the stone.
So if you're laying concrete, you really have to look at the weather.
Yeah, that day there was no rain in the forecast and just came out of nowhere. This fire pit area is shaped like a flower. So when you're up on the rooftop and you look down, it actually is truly shaped like a flower. This was an old recycled part of like a concrete smasher. And so we have a neighbor down the road whose son had a few of these, and he had a few extra and was like, do you guys want one for a fire pit? We're like, absolutely. So he brought it over with his tractor and set it in place. Once we set it down, we could not move it.
So your point of making an interior design that is elegant and neutral in colors contrasts with the wildness of the idea, right? It makes so much sense inside, but you are inside a flower pot. So
Yeah, we wanted people to feel like I could actually see myself living here. You know, we're in this really wacky structure, but I could still feel like this is home. So the staircase we assembled, this was a prefab kit because it is such a tight space. It was pretty challenging. Like you can see right here, there's like barely any room. Yeah. There was a couple things that we had to do. So like the poles here, the handrails, each one had to be individually cut to the right size. And so I just would go outside with my little grinder and just cut down all of the different posts.
so it's a mezzanine, right?
Yes, I'm scared of heights. And so when we were doing this build, there were a couple times where we didn't have the railing in quite yet. And so I'd have to reach over and do some things. And every time my hands would just sweat.
Wow. But you do see how it opens up. It's bigger up there.
Yeah, it is bigger up here. It is. It truly is because of that taper again. So this space is pretty cozy.
But all the colors, everything's earthy, green, green.
Yep,
right?
still that earthy. The headboard almost feels like a petal to me.
Oh, yeah.
What we did build though is back here, because this was again curved walls, really difficult. So we had to have a section for the headboard to sit flat, because as you can see, like that's not gonna work very well. So we had to build out this little section for the headboard just to be hung. So it was like even like something as simple as just hanging a headboard was just way more challenging in this space.
You can see why people sometimes
Don't do round, yeah. I mean, if you don't want to spend extra money and you don't want to have to be ultra creative, I would not do a round space, but there's so much fun.
We have 2 of them now.
2 round spaces. Apparently I can't get away from those. I don't know what my problem is, but
Yeah.
I do like the structure though. I just think it's just so fun. And it did require a different level of creativity, which was nice. You know, everything was custom cut. Everything had to be built very specifically, very intentionally.
So it is funny to be in a flower pot with the roof on. Like trapped somehow in a...
Exactly. It's very true. And we were like the most happy that we could get up to the rooftop. That was the biggest win. Have you been up here yet? Oh, what?
I know.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So this was a challenging area.
What is this? It feels like an escape hatch.
It kind of is. It's a commercial roof hatch. And so this is how you get up here.
Oh, wow.
So this is my favorite part.
Really?
I love the rooftop so much. When we first were building, I was like sweating the whole time. I'm like, this is terrifying.
Oh, that's right.
But it was so beautiful. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just so cool.
Yeah.
You don't see that all the time. We get a lot of questions about snow and like how does it does really, really good in the snow. We have the drain too. So it does actually like drain everything out. So it's not an issue at all.
So the drain just goes straight down.
It goes, it runs into our plumbing, the interior plumbing, and then it goes out. Yeah. So the idea is that my little honeysuckles are dead for this year, but they will eventually, I think it'll take a couple of years, but it'll start to cascade over. Yeah. And so our plan is to add a lot more planter boxes and like a living garden up here so that it feels much more green and just like the top of a flower pot.
So it's just overflowing.
Just like cascading over, just like beautiful scenery. And the cool thing too is like these little loungers. Again, stargazing is so great here. And so you can just sit up here, have your own private space, take in all of the view, see the farmers in action, and then of course check out the flower farm too.
So we're seeing some of that's your property?
Yep. So do you see that like kind of almost break? There's like a subtle color variation there.
I see that.
That's where the property line ends.
Okay.
So this is where all the flowers bloom.
Okay.
And then the pumpkin patch is back here.
So that's enough space to grow flowers for commercial. I mean, you can.
Yeah, a lot of the big commercial farms would probably be a couple of acres.
Okay.
But for most you-pick flower farms, which is what she's doing, an acre is more than sufficient. Yeah.
Because you can grow a lot.
You can grow quite a bit, and the crops, you know, and then it's like when you deadhead it and when you start to pick the flowers, it comes back.
And here you see the family house.
That's childhood home. It's so crazy. It is fun to like think back on when my parents were building it. Now I have so much respect for the amount of work that it took, you know? So that's what I notice now as an adult is I just look at that. I'm like, wow, they had to stack every log hand by hand. And it's just such a huge amount of work. So it's just wild to think about.
And it's interesting because how many years later did you then build your own thing?
Yeah, it would have been almost like 20 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so wild to think about that, but it is really fun to be on the family farm and just thinking about my grandpa plowing all the land. And now it's something where, you know, I'm pregnant and I can bring my daughter here and say, look at this, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So it makes me so excited.
To stay in touch with the land.
Yeah. Oh, makes me emotional.
Oh.
It's just really fun to think about. Yeah. And it's just really fun to be back in the community and near family. It is really cool.
It's interesting that you get emotional around the land.
Yeah, I know. It is kind of interesting, actually. I don't really know why that is. I think it's maybe that's like the only like touch point I have, that connection piece to that family history. And so it does, I mean, it does mean a lot. It really does.
Yeah.
Well, and these days, it's like everything makes me emotional. Yeah, but it is really fun. It's something where I think about, you know, bringing my daughter here when she's a little bit older, of course, and just, you know, showing her like, hey, your mom and your dad and your grandma, we built this.
Yeah.
And just taking her on that little tour. It's kind of a fun family piece.
Yeah. It's interesting because your great grandfather sort of worked the land.
Yeah.
Your parents built this house and you've put in
Right.
the flower pot.
And then we've done something totally different. Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of like a generational thing. When I think about that, I'm like, wow, 65 years and it's never been developed. That is quite profound.
Yeah. Right. All that's like what he had.
Yeah. Like it's just,
Wow.
there's no development. And so I just think it's so interesting where, you know, where I live in Boise, everywhere around me is just developing and those small farms are just going away. But to have something where it's like it's still preserved is really, it's quite rare.